They say the American market is a gold mine for European entrepreneurs, but how do you stand out in the competitive landscape? I'm Christina Rubafe-Broaddus, the American market alchemist, and I believe that anyone can write their U.S. success story to amplify their influence and scale their impact beyond the borders of their home market. In this podcast, you'll hear inspiring stories and practical advice from American market experts and European entrepreneurs who are making an impact in the U.S. Tune in each week for a dose of motivation and tactical tips to build your influence and visibility in the world's largest market so you stand out, attract more clients, and turn your European business into American gold. Now, let's dive in. Welcome back for another episode of the American Market Alchemist podcast. I'm your host, Christina Rubafe-Broaddus, and in today's episode, I'm very excited to have a special guest, Franziska Kirchner, who is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Intropy. You're going to learn more about what they do and what she does, but we're going to especially look into her fascinating journey from physicist to artificial intelligence entrepreneur, and also really explore some key insights about doing business with Americans. Now, Franziska is British, and often we think about one of the biggest differences of doing business with Americans might be the language difference, especially if you're from a country like France, Spain, Germany, whatever. Franziska, of course, her native language is English. So we're going to talk about some of the cultural differences, especially of doing business with Americans, about, how you have to really focus on the ROI, the return on investment, demonstrate that there's a clear, quick financial return so that you can really gain the trust and interest. We're going to look at different regional nuances, because, as I always say, the US is many different regions, different cultures. Franziska is going to talk about that. And she's also going to talk about the tech adoption by large U.S. companies and how that can provide a strategic advantage in convincing other businesses in other countries to get on board with you. So stay tuned. This is a very enlightening conversation on merging artificial intelligence with some traditional industries and effective strategies for business success in the U.S. market. All right, let's get into it. And we're back with another episode of the American Market Alchemist podcast. Very excited because I've got a very special guest here, Franziska Kirchner, who is in London, from London originally, and has a company called Intropy that I think, Franziska, we actually met through LinkedIn on a post about women in tech and AI, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. No, very, 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 very excited about this interview because in the podcast, although the vocation of the podcast is not specifically to focus on women entrepreneurs, I am very much all about having as many women guests as men guests, because working together, I believe that's we got to work together. Women are doing great things, men are doing great things. Put the spotlight on all of us. Franziska, I would like for you to tell us if you just want to give us a little introduction to you and what you do actually.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, really excited to be joining you on this podcast. So yeah, I'm Franziska. So as you said, I'm based in London, and right now I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called Intropy. And what we do is we help sort of parts and equipment businesses sort of make the most of their data, bring their data together, and start to make decisions with their data day to day. Which is, really, really interesting topic. I think before that, so I've worked in AI now for about 6-ish years. Before that, I was at a company called Tractable, which was doing AI for sort of automotive. And then actually before that, I was a physicist. So I did my undergrad PhD in Oxford, did a mixture of both theoretical and experimental physics. And that was very much focused on kind of trying to find new and interesting kinds of magnets
Mm.
that could be useful one day, industry and in society.
Okay, no, very interesting. And it sounds like, yeah, it's to me, it sounds like there's a mix of sort of the, very cutting edge stuff, what's happening with artificial intelligence. But then also, it seems like, some very traditional industries there. And it's really kind of bringing together that sort of, traditional industry plus all of this very exciting, very new stuff that's happening with artificial intelligence and doing some exciting things that we're going to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. I love this whole thing of like bringing together sort of industries that sort of haven't used technology as much as others have done, sort of like, at least especially in the last few years, and sort of really helping them to like bring in AI, leverage AI, and make their businesses a lot better.
right. Yeah, no. And so you said you actually got started as a physicist. You did your PhD at Oxford. You were publishing papers on all of these things. Can you tell us a little bit about how did you actually make that switch?
Yeah. So it's an interesting one. So I think sort of since I was a kid, I was interested in physics. I absolutely I loved physics. At some point, I decided my life goal was to try and find this kind of like a special kind of magnet called a magnetic
Right.
monopole, which is, when you have a magnet, it normally has a north and a south pole.
Yeah.
You cut it in half and then you get like a north and south here and then north and south here. But a magnetic monopole is basically you cut a magnet in half and then you have a north here and a south here and they can fly around on their own.
Okay.
And so my kind of like as a kid, I got really into this and I was like, I'm going to find the monopoles. That's my goal.
Yeah.
And that's sort of why I went into physics. And what was really cool is we managed to, like, under very like specific conditions, we managed to kind of observe these monopoles, which was awesome. But I think the thing that was always, I guess, hanging over me is what I was doing is sort of like very like, I don't know, like very like pure like research science, very like quite theoretical at times.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily like I couldn't see a lot of the work that I was doing would have impact in society in my lifetime, because things like seeing these monopoles, you've got to be like in a super isolated room, like like several stories underground. You have to be like a few degrees above the temperature of outer space.
Okay, right, yeah.
Very hard to say put that technology into a computer or put that technology anywhere outside of like a very specific lab condition. And so I think what really drove me to go to AI was I wanted to do something with, I guess, more like short to medium term impact where I could build something and then see people using that thing.
Yeah, right,
And I think it's sort of AI was cool. AI was interesting. There are a lot of AI businesses out there. So I thought I'd just like I watched a bunch of YouTube videos. I can probably do this. This is fine. I managed to get an internship at Tractable, and sort of from there I learned a lot more and got really into it.
Very interesting. Yeah, exactly. And I love how it's just like, this is I'm going to go out and I'm going to learn things myself and start that way and then go deeper into it. And now, when we were talking about this podcast and getting together to actually share this story, you told me that you had published a paper and that nobody wanted to fund the experiments, but then something happened.
Yeah, so this is sort of related to the monopole stuff. So I like my dream was like to find these monopoles, and what I did was basically like a bunch of theoretical studies to say, hey, if you do any of these experiments, you should see this signal, and that should be monopoles, and it can't be anything else. But the problem was a lot of the experiments we suggested were at the time physically impossible, and
little problem.
Is not an issue, by the way. Like that doesn't stop you doing anything, but it's so the difficult thing was kind of in order for these experiments to materialize, you had to actually build something. You had to invest money, and so I think we explored a few different avenues. So some worked out better than others. But what was kind of really cool is right towards the end of my PhD, I'd sort of accepted. I was like, okay, this is like no one's going to be able to perform this experiment. So it's whatever. I'm a theorist. I don't mind.
It's okay.
So I was at a conference in LA, and I was going to talk about this work that we'd done, and someone came up to me afterwards from Cornell, and he was like, I think we could build this, and I think we could do this, and I was like, oh god.
Wow.
my first reaction was like, if I've made any numerical mistakes in these simulations, like we're screwed because we've
Like,
wasted.
uh-oh, like now the people are actually going to test this and they're going to see if these
Yeah,
numbers add up or not. Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
yeah. It was so my first reaction was like, okay, I'm terrified now, but I really
Yeah.
want to see if this thing works.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so we worked with this team in Cornell. Like they were very well funded. They
Mm,
managed to sort of build an experiment. I went over there, and sort of we made that first observation of monopoles, which was really really
right.
cool. And we
Yeah.
managed to publish that in Nature. It was awesome. And sort of as far as I'm aware, no one's disproven it yet, which is
Okay.
good.
Wow. That's okay. Very impressive. Yeah.
So that was really really exciting, and I think that's probably, I guess, my first experience. I know like this podcast is all about like working with sort of
Mm,
Americans doing business in America. I think that
yeah.
was really my first experience, sort of, I guess, like working with that, like a research team based in America.
Yeah.
That's, I guess, sort of when I started to like fall in love with sort of like working with sort of like
Mm.
American groups and American teams.
Yeah. Because it's interesting. And I don't know if, I'm not going to make any sort of judgments about like nobody in Europe wanted to fund this for whatever reason, but okay, whatever. Like somebody in the US saw the opportunity, had the budget to actually, make it concrete and then, made it happen. And so with Intropy, do you work with the US today?
Yeah, so we work a lot with the US. Like a lot of our primary focus is on the US market.
Mm,
We also explore other markets, so we're exploring
sure.
the UK as well. But we're mainly focused on the US. I think there are a bunch of reasons for this. I
Hmm.
think probably the main thing is, for what we're doing, the US is the biggest market by far. They have
Right.
huge parts and equipment economy there, a lot of different businesses, a lot of different large businesses. We're very focused on enterprise.
Yeah.
So it's important for us that we have sort of a decent number of enterprises that we can
Mm,
tackle. And so that's sort of where we're focusing initially. Obviously,
yeah.
in one day in the future, we want to be global, we want to be
Of
everywhere.
course.
But I think one thing that I learned, especially sort of from my work in Tractable, is when you build these sort of large enterprise softwares, when you work across different countries, there are always
Mm,
going to be very sort of like specific adaptations, especially if you're going
right.
into an industry that maybe has like specific regulations.
Right.
There are always going to be differences between different countries. So
Hmm.
when sort of launching new products, I like to sort of begin with one country first, figure it
Yeah.
out for that one, and then sort of see how you can expand that more globally.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Just yeah, start and that's kind of what I tell people is like pick a place, start there, and then go bigger. Don't try to conquer everywhere at the same time because you're just going to die in the end from like stress and trying to do too many things at once. Now, something you said that was interesting was about regulations. Of course, in Europe, different countries have different regulations. In the US, different states also might have different regulations. Now, was that an issue? How did you guys manage that? Yeah, what was the situation around the states in the US and the different regulations?
Yeah, so I think what we found so far, like the industry that we're in, the products that we're building, generally from state to state, things are quite
Mm,
similar. So there are
okay.
obviously like some differences. So for example, like emissions regulations,
Yeah.
there's sort of one standard in California, there's
Yeah.
one standard everywhere else, but actually like certain regions. Like not even certain states, certain regions and certain
Mm,
states can decide whether they pick the California or the
yeah.
federal emissions regulations. So there
Yeah.
are there are always going to be sort of nuances, but
Mm,
sort of like at the very like broad strokes level,
right.
there are things that would mean we have to build our product in a fundamentally different way, or think about sort of
Mm.
very big feature changes as we move from region to region.
Okay, yeah. So it's more like little tweaks for, if you're trying to, I guess, respond to the requirements of the California emissions standards, which are very strict, compared to maybe somewhere like Mississippi or Texas or Florida or other places, let's say, which are probably much less strict. And like you said, you don't have to totally redo what you're building. You can just make some little adjustments, and maybe that's a bit easier compare? I don't know. Was that easier compared to Europe? Are there really huge differences from country to country?
I think there's one thing around the regulation side. There are other differences. So, for example, just even language. For example,
Yeah.
things like decision-making processes, sort of how
Mm.
businesses operate. So, like when you're doing these big enterprise deals, like they're quite complicated
Yeah.
a lot of the time. There's a lot of different stakeholders. The way those stakeholders interact is quite complex. And
Mm.
actually, one thing I realized is like differs maybe like more significantly from like
Yeah.
European country to European country
Yeah.
is how that dynamic works and how do you go about a deal? How do you get the right people in the room? How do
Right.
you get sort of everyone on board? Because
Right.
there are some areas, so like for example in Scandinavia is maybe a lot more
Yeah.
like consensus based, whereas say like in the US there's more sort of like you'll maybe have like one, two, three people you've got to get bought in, and
Right.
and they can make the decision. So I think one side is just purely from like regulation, like feature
Mm.
kind of personalization, that sort of thing. But another one is actually like for the business I'm in, how do you navigate closing a deal? How do you navigate
Right.
that sales process? And
Yeah.
what I found is sort of between different American states,
Yeah.
like a lot of companies I work with work across the US anyway. They have teams from sort of all over the place in the
Mm.
US. That's a lot more uniform. That's
Sure.
sort of like GTM and sales side of things.
Interesting, interesting. And so, yeah, that's really interesting because, often we think, and I mean, there are studies that have been done saying in the US, there are different nations, different regional cultures, et cetera. But like you said, because people are also working across states and you might have a team in the US that's got some people in California, some people in New York, some people in Kansas, whatever. Those kind of regional differences might actually not show up so much.
Mhm.
And I'm curious to know, you talked about sort of the decision-making process and going in there and just kind of getting people on board. When you're going into the US market as a, let's say, European company or foreign company, a non-American company, how do you do that actually? How do you get them to trust you and to do business with you and things like that?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Like I've never really felt like it's harder for me to do
Yeah.
business because I'm British. But I'm very fortunate in that like the language is the same. That makes
Yeah,
things
right.
a lot easier.
Yeah.
I think sort of ultimately going to the US, like closing a deal, being successful in your company is like, can you make people money? Can you make them
Mm.
money faster?
Yeah.
And can you sort of build a better, more performant product that sort of brings a higher ROI than whatever they're doing right now?
Mm. Right.
And I think sort of when I think about sort of building, releasing products, it's very much all I care about is the ROI. Like if this thing
Mm.
works, if this thing brings money,
Yeah.
then that's something that like it'll pay for itself.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I've always like wanted to have this like very strong focus on sort of performance and
Mm.
results from the product.
Interesting. Yeah.
Obviously, kind of there's always a balance, especially in these enterprise deals, between sort of like the hard numbers and then
Yeah.
obviously relationship building, the trust, especially if it's early stage products where there's a lot more
Mm.
uncertainty as well. But I like for me, I think like if I can show results as fast as possible, then the
Yeah.
conversation becomes so much easier.
Ah, okay.
So
Interesting.
it's sort of that's the approach that I've taken, which at least from my experience seems to work well with
Yeah.
American audiences.
Yeah.
I think honestly it works well with sort of audiences sort of across different countries.
Everywhere. I mean, everybody wants to make more money, right?
Like if you can say like I'm going to make your business better, I'm going to make you more money. Like no one's going to say
No
no
one's
to it.
gonna. No, thanks. I'm good. Yeah.
But
Right.
I think that's sort of like quite direct, that quite like results focused approach
Mm.
is what I've seen works pretty well.
Okay. No, yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's very helpful because sometimes I feel like, people might be afraid to get into that discussion about money and profits and return on investment too soon because they don't want to be perceived as I'm only concerned about money. And they're not, but like you said, that is kind of a very, very, very important criteria for deciding, like, do we spend more time talking to each other to explore the opportunities or not? So really maybe getting that out on the table early on can just make everything easier. Like you said, if they see that you're going to help them make more money, hey, then they're going to listen to you more. And if they see that they're not convinced, well, at least nobody wastes their time.
Yeah, and I think as well, like, because I was born, I grew up in England. Like British people, I feel like are generally more modest than Americans, and so I think I always had this initial hesitation of like, oh, I don't want to put like hard numbers on the table. I don't want to bring money straight away because like, oh, well, what if it doesn't work? What if something goes wrong? But I think sort of as sort of time goes on, and I guess like I've just sort of got more confidence. I have like a better idea now of how to get results quickly, how to start quantifying things as soon as possible.
Right.
Once you have those tools, once you have a good technique for doing that, then the discussion becomes a lot easier. But it is like sometimes when I go into a sales, because like I'm a tech person, I'm not a salesperson by trade. So I'm always thinking about like, oh, all of the caveats, and then I have like my sort of like British like honest vibes. So it is a little bit like sometimes I'm in these calls and I'm just like, how am I going to get through this? But I think it's just the case of when you've gone through this a few times, especially when you're launching new things, when you can deal with that uncertainty, how can you feel reassured? How can you bring the value quickly? Then it starts to sort of get easier with those discussions.
Yeah, just with experience, in fact. Yeah, you sort of learn, all right, this is how I have to play the game in this culture, and it's a little weird for me, but hey, I'll get used to it. And then you do get used to it. Now, what about, let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence here, because that's such a hot topic in all industries right now. And I feel like, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that the attitudes towards artificial intelligence in the US versus in the various countries in Europe, that there can be maybe some big differences. I don't know if that's something that you've seen and experienced.
Yeah, I think especially because the industry that I'm in it's more of an older industry. The average demographic is sort of older. They like use maybe less technology than say like SaaS companies.
Right, sure.
And so I think I've sort of seen across all countries, there's always going to be some hesitancy around AI. Like people are not that familiar with it. People maybe don't use it that much in their day-to-day lives. Like people aren't using like ChatGPT, or they're not using Siri or whatever. And so that kind of, I guess, like adoption problem is something that I see everywhere. I think sort of like what's quite good in the US, like often when you sort of look in like across the industry I'm in, and you look at the companies that are, I guess, the most technologically advanced, and like often they're going to be the largest companies that can afford the biggest IT teams, that can afford to invest the most in technology. They're often US based, those are very, very big companies. And so they can often set, I guess, like the precedent for other companies in that space to say, hey, our like bigger, more successful competitor is doing this thing, we should try and do something like this too. Whereas maybe I've seen, so for example, like in the UK or other places in Europe, sometimes like the industry I'm in, it's difficult, or like I guess more difficult to find sort of those sort of, I guess, like trailblazing companies, if that makes sense. And that's often something that kind of I can leverage if I'm trying to sort of get a business that's maybe not used AI before, get them on board, say, hey, look, your competitors are using this. They're making way more money than you. You should start using this too, which really helps. And I think that's always when you've looked for sort of first partners to co-develop on new products, that's the sort of, I guess, line of reasoning that works well to get people on board with something that maybe they're sort of unsure about, maybe haven't done before.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's very, very interesting. Yeah, I think like you said, it's just, I guess the way it is in the US, it does tend to be the bigger companies with the bigger budgets, et cetera, which means they can perhaps be a little bit ahead of the game, maybe a little less wary of this kind of technology, a little less hesitant to adapt it, which I think, just kind of makes things go faster for what you're doing. Exactly. Right. Yeah. My cat, by the way, is coming in to photobomb our podcast, I think. We'll see if she like passes between me and the computer, which she just might do. Right. So I guess a final question is, from the work that you've been doing in the US and in different countries in Europe, is there some tip, strategy, insight that you feel you wish you had known when you started, that you would like to share with others?
Yeah, I think probably one thing I wish I'd have known, especially because I was a tech person going into very non-technical industries. And I think sort of I had maybe made the incorrect assumption that sort of things that are interesting and useful for me will be interesting and useful for the customers. So things
Mm,
like just the whole concept of using AI, or the concept of kind
there she
of
goes,
some like
cat.
cool or interesting technology. I thought that might be valid selling points, but it turns out, so industries I'm going in, they don't care as long as their business does well. It doesn't really matter what's
Mm,
behind the scenes. And I think one thing that really helped was sort of connecting with, I guess, like industry experts.
mm,
I think in Tractable, I was very lucky there. We had like a lot of connections to people who are very well
right.
established in the industries we were in. Again, now, like I'm talking a lot to people who've been working in the industry for like 20, 30, 40 years,
Mm,
and really sort of understanding, number one, what is the type of language that people use? Because it's
mm,
very different to, say, like selling to tech companies.
right.
The sort of like values they hold, the sort of things that are very important to them as a business are pretty different. And so
Mm,
speaking to those experts, working out what the right language is, working out what the
yeah.
right framing is, that's something I think I should have picked up on a lot sooner, because it
Mm,
is sort of very different to sort of
right.
my background. So I
Interesting.
definitely think, like, anyone who's sort of thinking of taking their business to the US, connect with, like, just find some sort of expert. I
Yeah.
think through sort of like your own network, finding people on LinkedIn,
Mm,
uh, like it's always possible to find like
yeah.
someone who's been in the industry for tens of years,
Right. Yeah.
and sort of do things like run through your sales pitch with them,
Yeah.
do things like run through, say, like even your website, how do you frame your product in your website,
Mm,
and just get their feedback on, like, is this appealing to the audience that
yeah.
you're trying to address.
Right. Yeah. And I think that that's really good advice. And I feel like that if people just reach out and ask, they'll
Mm.
be surprised. I mean, not everybody's going to say yes, but they'll be surprised that there are people that, hey, they don't know you. They don't know what you're about, but you're just reaching out and you're asking for a little bit of help, and they'll be willing to help you. And
Mm.
I think that, yeah, that's very, very, very good advice
Yeah.
for others to hear. So yeah.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
think also, if you're doing business in America, go to America, meet people in person, like the in person, especially like after COVID,
Mm,
there's now like a lot more you can do on Zoom, which is
yeah.
great. But especially like if you're doing enterprise sales, like making that connection, meeting people, like if
Yeah.
like I'm working in a very industrial field, like going to a
Yeah.
warehouse, going to a scrapyard is
Yeah.
super useful, just to see things up close, to just sort of make that connection, to build that relationship.
Mm,
And so, yeah, definitely travel to the US. But one
yeah.
warning is visas take a long time to get. So obviously,
Ooh,
depending on your passport.
sure.
So make sure you plan this in advance.
Yeah, take into consideration the administrative delays. Yeah, we like to say things go faster in the US, but then there's always exceptions to that rule, and one exception I think is the administrative aspect of anything. All right, great. Franziska, where can people find you, learn about your company, connect with you, all of that stuff?
Yeah, so I think kind of my LinkedIn is probably the best. If you go linkedin.com/Frankirsch, I guess,
Okay,
is
yeah.
yeah,
And
that's
I'll put the links to all of this, in the notes so people can just go and click. So yeah, LinkedIn, yeah.
yeah, LinkedIn, and our website is intropy.ai. Also, yeah, I can share the link for that. It's
Okay.
very sort of, we're an early stage company, so the website, there isn't much on the website right now, but we're very much sort of focused on building the product versus building the website at the moment.
Yeah.
But there you can find out a little bit more about sort of what we're doing at Intropy as well.
Okay, awesome. And actually, one other question, because you said you're kind of starting up in early stages, and I like to ask this question to, the founders and the companies that come onto this podcast is there anything that you're looking for at the moment in case somebody hears it on this episode and they could reach out and contact you because you're looking for anything? Is there anything that that's a surprise question, so I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah,
Um,
I wasn't
I
expecting.
was expecting that question.
Yeah, I think probably what we're looking for now. I think if anyone knows any really good software engineers, please let me
Okay.
know. We're always looking for more software engineers.
Okay,
Uh,
awesome.
I think, yeah, we're based in London, but we're sort of pretty flexible where you are, as long as you're not kind of too many hours out of our time
Mm,
zone.
yeah, right. Like in California, kind
Yeah,
of hard to work with. Right.
it's expensive if they're in
Also,
California.
also, yeah, exactly. Right. Okay, great. So yeah, yeah, any software engineers, you can reach out. And Franziska, I just want to say thank you very much for coming onto the podcast, for sharing your experience and your story with our listeners. And I'm wishing you all the best in your success in the U.S. market and everywhere else.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me.
See ya. Thanks for listening to the American Market Alchemist podcast. If you're ready to amplify your influence and scale your impact in the U.S. market, become a member of my newsletter community. You'll get weekly tips on LinkedIn strategy, personal branding, and digital marketing to write your U.S. success story. The link to get the newsletter is in the show notes. I'm Christina Rubafe-Broaddus, and I'll talk to you next time.